It began quietly after my marriage ended, not with drama, but with a gentle settling, like the stillness that fills a room once everyone has gone home and the echoes of laughter finally fade. I was still young enough that people called me attractive at dinners and reunions, but old enough that the word sometimes felt wrapped in sympathy. 42. A woman with an adult child and a house that held too much silence. My friends liked to say I was fortunate, free, independent, finally able to focus on myself. What they never witnessed were the evenings I spent standing in front of the bathroom mirror, slowly letting my hair fall loose, staring at my own reflection, and wondering if anyone would ever reach for me again, if I would ever feel that familiar closeness. My son, Ethan, had just turned 24. He had always been the quiet one, thoughtful, observant, kind in a way that didn't demand attention. There was a steadiness about him that reflected something deep inside me. After graduating, he stayed in the city for work, stopping by on weekends when schedules allowed. I lived near Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and for years I convinced myself that the calm of a lakeside town was a gift. Peaceful. Healing. That illusion held until Ethan came to stay for a few weeks. His office building was undergoing renovations, and at the same time, his lease happened to end.
Temporary, he said.
Simple. The day he arrived, I was sitting on the back deck with a mug of tea, watching the water shimmer in the afternoon light. I remember exactly how the late summer sun caught his face when he stepped out of the car, lifting a hand in that familiar, slightly awkward wave that still made my chest tighten with pride. He carried a worn duffel and a box filled with books, his constant companions. "Mom," he said easily, wrapping me in a hug that lingered just long enough for me to notice. That night, we cooked together. Nothing fancy. Just chopping and stirring, his hands working beside mine, our elbows brushing now and then. Conversation flowed without effort, laughter slipping in between sentences. I realized later how long it had been since I'd laughed like that, unguarded and real. As the days passed, something subtle changed. Not him, me. I began noticing details I had never paid attention to before. The way he moved through the kitchen with a dish towel thrown over his shoulder. How focused he looked while reading, brow drawn together, fingers pushing through his hair without thought. He hadn't slowly grown into a man. I felt like I'd blinked and suddenly he was one. I tried to bury the awareness that followed because it made no sense and had no place to exist. Still, my pulse betrayed me at odd moments, when I heard the shower running, or when he crossed the room bare-chested, unaware of my presence. It felt wrong. Embarrassing. And yet, emotions don't always ask permission. One evening, we sat on the couch watching an old movie from my younger years, one he clearly tolerated for my sake. The room was dim, the shared glass of wine softening my thoughts. He turned to comment on something trivial, but the moment stretched longer than it should have. His voice dropped slightly. His eyes searched mine. I was the one who looked away. "Mom," he asked gently. "You all right?" "Yeah," I said too quickly. "Just tired." I wasn't tired at all. I was acutely aware of everything. That night, I lay awake with my bedroom door slightly open, listening to the quiet sounds of him getting ready for bed, the tap of footsteps, the low hum of the house settling. I told myself it was loneliness playing tricks on me, that the warmth, the closeness, the sense of connection were simply human needs resurfacing after too much time alone. Still, deep inside, I knew something had shifted. Something unnamed. Something that wouldn't stay silent forever. The days grew warmer, heavy with the promise of late summer rain, but my thoughts kept circling back to him. His presence filled the house in ways that went beyond the obvious, more than shoes by the door or an extra toothbrush at the sink. It was his voice lingering after conversations ended, the way I felt drawn to him through shared smiles over breakfast, or the accidental brush of fingers when passing plates. When he wasn't nearby, the house felt hollow. I began inventing small reasons to be close. That evening, the quiet felt louder than usual. I stood in front of my closet, my eyes landing on a navy satin robe I hadn't worn in years. It was smooth, familiar, something from a time when I still felt desired. I slipped it on, the fabric cool against my skin. A hint of perfume, an old favorite, and a few minutes curling my hair, just enough to soften my reflection. I didn't know what I was trying to accomplish. I only knew I wanted to see him. I found Ethan stretched across his bed, a book resting against his chest. He looked up when I leaned against the doorframe. I saw the brief pause in his expression, the way his eyes caught the sheen of the fabric, the loose curl near my cheek, before he quickly looked back down. "Hey," I said quietly. "How's the book?" A small smile touched his lips, but he avoided my gaze.
Good.
Just reached the part where everything starts falling apart. I stepped inside, my bare feet silent on the carpet. "Mind if I stay for a bit?" He nodded, shifting to make room beside him. I eased onto the mattress beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his leg through the blanket. My eyes drifted to his hands as they moved lightly across the page, more for habit than focus. It was clear he wasn't absorbing a word. "You've seemed a little wound up lately," I said in a quiet voice, keeping my tone light. "I notice your posture, your shoulders, the way you hold tension in your back." He let out a quiet chuckle and turned toward me, his eyes finally meeting mine. "Yeah," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "Guess I've been curled over this book too long." "Lie down." I offered, my voice even but warm. "Let me give you a little massage, just for a few minutes." He hesitated just for a breath, but then turned onto his stomach, folding his arms beneath his head. I knelt beside him on the bed, the fabric of my robe whispering across my skin as I settled. My hands hovered for a moment, then touched his back, warm through the thin cotton of his t-shirt. I started slow, my fingers tracing the edges of his shoulder blades, working gently into the tight muscles. He exhaled, a soft sound, and I felt him begin to relax beneath my touch. "You're always doing so much," I murmured. "Carrying too much, thinking too hard." "Someone has to," he replied, his voice muffled, but there was a note of tenderness in it. "Especially for you." My hands paused just briefly. Then I resumed, letting my touch glide up to the base of his neck. He smelled faintly of cedar and soap, the scent stirring something in me that I wasn't ready to name. His skin was warm, and I could feel the heat rising in me, too. Emotional electric. He didn't speak again, only breathed steadily, as if surrendering to the quiet closeness of the moment. When I finally drew my hands away, he turned slightly, his cheek brushing against the pillow as he looked up at me. "Thanks, Mom," he said quietly. But his eyes lingered on me. On the curve of the robe at my shoulder, on the soft tendrils of hair that had fallen loose. There was something else there, something unspoken but unmistakable. I smiled gently, brushing a strand of hair from his brow. "Anytime, sweetheart." I left his room with my heart pounding, unsure of what I'd started, only that it wasn't finished. Sleep did not come easily that night, even long after I had left Adam's room. His warmth lingered on my fingertips. I lay in bed, my body tangled in the sheets. The quiet hum of the ceiling fan doing little to soothe the unrest inside me. I turned from side to side, pressing my thighs together around the blanket, trying to chase away the thoughts that clung to me like dew. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was his mother, his guide, his anchor, not someone who longed for the sound of his footsteps in the hallway or replayed every glance like a secret. But loneliness has a way of revealing the cracks beneath the surface, and mine were wide open now. By the time morning arrived, my thoughts were still unsettled, but my mind was made up. The air was already warm, sunlight spilling in with a soft, honeyed glow that made the house feel gentler than usual. I slid open the closet and reached for a red swimsuit I hadn't touched in years. Simple, confident, with narrow straps and an open back that followed the natural curve of me. I pulled it on, draped my robe loosely over it, and began gathering what I'd need. A small basket filled with blueberries and strawberries. A bottle of cold water. My favorite body oil, lightly scented with citrus and almond. And yes, I tucked my quiet little companion carefully into the bottom of the bag. I wasn't sure I'd need it, but knowing it was there brought a strange sense of reassurance, all its own. The lake was about a 15-minute walk, following a narrow forest trail that stayed hidden from the road. A secluded inlet most people didn't know existed. It had always been our place, mine and Ethan's, even when he was younger. I hadn't returned in years. Not since before the divorce. It felt like the right place to slip away for a while. I stepped into the kitchen just as Ethan was coming down the stairs. His hair was rumpled from sleep, his t-shirt hanging loosely on his frame. He paused when he saw me, his eyes traveling over me without thinking, then quickly correcting themselves. "You're up early," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. I smiled, pretending not to notice. "I thought I'd head to the lake for a bit. Get some sun. Clear my thoughts." He scratched the back of his neck, studying me with a spark of curiosity. "By yourself?" I nodded, lifting the basket. "I just need some quiet time." He glanced out the window, then back at me. "Mind if I come along? I'll change and catch up." There was something in his tone, easy, but layered with something else. Interest, maybe. Or concern. "Of course," I said evenly, though something fluttered beneath my ribs. Stepping outside, the morning breeze brushed against my legs, warm and promising. The walk felt different today, as if the air itself held an unspoken charge. I moved slowly, letting the sun warm my skin, breathing in pine and wildflowers as the forest opened around me. The lake emerged through the trees like a memory waiting to be reclaimed, smooth, quiet, untouched. I spread my towel on the grass near the water and let the robe slide from my shoulders, the morning light settling over me as if it had been waiting. The breeze played with the edge of my swimsuit as I smoothed the citrus almond oil over my arms, then down along my legs, the warmth of it blending with the sun and scenting the air around me. I took a bite of a strawberry, its juice slipping lazily down my thumb as I sat quietly, waiting, not for anything specific, just letting the stillness wrap around me. There was a strange comfort in the quiet, but it wasn't the same as being alone. Not anymore. The sunlight had risen just enough to scatter golden shimmer across the lake, the kind of soft radiance that made everything feel suspended in time. I had just finished the last berry, the tart-sweet taste still lingering on my lips, when my thoughts drifted, unwelcome but familiar, to that slow-burning tension I'd carried with me from the night before. With the towel now wrapped around my waist and the breeze brushing every inch of skin it could reach, I leaned back into the grass, one hand reaching absently into my bag. My fingertips grazed over the soft velvet pouch buried at the bottom. I hadn't planned to take it out. It had felt like a safety net, something tucked away just in case the quiet grew too loud. And yet, something about the air today, about being outside the ordinary, had shaken loose some of my hesitation. I hadn't even opened the pouch, just felt the cool contour through the fabric, when a sudden shift in the underbrush. The crisp snap of a twig. I froze. "Hey," Ethan called out. His voice pulled me back so quickly it felt like being caught in a dream. I turned, my hand darting away from the bag, as though it had burned me. He stood at the edge of the clearing, framed by the trees, wearing only a loose pair of charcoal gray shorts that hung low on his hips. His chest was bare, sun catching in the fine golden hairs on his arms and the line that led down his stomach. His skin was warm from the walk and damp with the sheen of the growing heat. A blink smiled too quickly. "That was fast," I said, shielding my eyes against the glare as he stepped closer. "Didn't want you to get too far ahead," he replied, his grin easy. But I saw the quick flick of his eyes over me again. The curve of my legs, the color of my swimsuit, the way my hair stuck slightly to my neck from the oil. It was subtle, but it wasn't lost on me. He set his towel beside mine and sat down, arms propped behind him as he stretched out his long legs. I watched the muscles shift beneath his skin, every movement fluid, unconscious, and it took everything in me not to stare. For a while we said nothing. The water lapped gently at the shore, the wind stirring the tall reeds, the moment sitting heavy between us. I could feel him glancing at me. Just as I could feel the heat blooming low in my belly again, I shifted slightly, trying to compose myself, folding one leg over the other, pretending to adjust my sunglasses. "You always catch the sun so easily," he said softly, his gaze following the way the light settled across my arms. "I remember coming here years ago. You'd lie down for a while, then wake up glowing, like you'd borrowed something from the sky." I laughed, though it came out a little uneven. That's a generous version of events. I mostly remember spending the next week dealing with the consequences. He smiled at that, but his eyes didn't immediately drift away. "Maybe," he said after a beat. "Still, you look really good." The words landed gently, but they lingered longer than I expected, hanging between us with the hum of insects and the quiet lap of water against the shore. The words settled between us with a strange weight. I didn't answer.
Couldn't.
He stood a moment later, brushing off his hands. "I think I'll take a quick swim," he said, his voice light again, but something lingered beneath it. Something neither of us dared name. He stepped toward the water, his shoulders strong and back relaxed as he walked slowly in. The lake welcomed him, the ripples forming in widening rings as he dove under the surface. I watched him emerge. His hair slicked back, droplets glistening on his skin. I had never noticed how grown he'd become. Not like this. My heart thudded low and slow in my chest as I watched him float on his back, eyes closed to the sun, the silence between us deeper than before. I reached again slowly, this time into the bag, my fingers brushing the edge of my secret. But I didn't move. Not yet. Because I wasn't alone anymore. And some things once felt couldn't be unfelt. Adam emerged from the lake with slow, deliberate strides, water trailing down his chest and legs, each drop catching sunlight like liquid crystal. His hair was slicked back, face flushed, eyes glinting with something playful. "Planning to just sit there and soak up the view all day?" he teased, a mischievous grin spreading as he stepped closer. Before I could respond, he bent slightly and gave his head a quick shake, sending a spray of cool droplets flying in my direction like a summer storm. "Ethan," I yelped, instinctively throwing up an arm to block the splash, though laughter escaped me before I could stop it. He chuckled, clearly pleased with himself. "That's payback for sneaking off without me." His voice light, but behind the humor was something deeper, something we didn't name, but both felt. He sat back down beside me, breath slightly quickened from the swim, his skin gleaming, smelling of fresh water and sun. I adjusted my towel, laying it out flat before stretching out on my stomach, turning my head to one side and letting my arms fall lazily by my sides. "I need your help with something," I said casually, the words rehearsed in my head 100 times. "Oh," his voice was closer now, curious. "My back," I murmured. "I can't reach it properly. The oil's in the bag." There was a pause just long enough to feel it. Then I heard the rustle of him reaching for the bottle, the soft pop of the cap opening. I closed my eyes as I felt the first touch, warm, deliberate, the oil gliding onto the small of my back with a gentleness that made my breath catch. He said nothing, and neither did I. His hands worked slowly, spreading the oil up my back, over my shoulders, then down again lower. When he reached the curve just above my hips, I shifted slightly, letting out a soft breath, pretending it was just comfort I sought. "You okay?" he asked quietly, his voice tighter now. "Yes," I said, barely audible. "Just feels nice." His hand stilled for half a second before continuing, his touch lingering in ways I could no longer dismiss as accidental. I could feel the restraint in his movements, the careful way he avoided going too far. And yet every inch he covered felt electric. When he finished, I turned my head to look at him, my voice softer. "Now your turn," he blinked.
"What?"
"You'll burn without something?" I said, sitting up slowly and reaching for the bottle. "It's only fair." He hesitated, but only for a moment, then gave a quiet nod, turning his back toward me. His skin was warm beneath my fingers, the scent of oil rising between us. I smoothed it over his shoulders, down his spine, feeling the quiet tension in his muscles. His breath hitched once when I reached lower, fingers trailing just above the waistline of his shorts. I tried not to glance down, but I did. And what I saw confirmed what I already suspected. He may have said nothing, but his body was speaking for him. His skin was still warm beneath my hands, the oil shimmering over his back as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the grass. I took my time, though my heart was beating far too fast. Every brush of my fingertips guided not just by care, but by something I had tried for days, maybe years, to ignore. When I finished, I capped the bottle with hands that felt far from steady. Ethan, still facing away from me, was silent. I watched the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers curled against his knees. Then, without a word, he turned. There was nothing playful in his expression now. His eyes met mine, open, vulnerable, and fierce all at once. The teasing grin he'd worn earlier had vanished, replaced with something raw, something that had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me, not tentatively, not awkwardly, but with the weight of someone who had been holding back too much for too long, and I let him. I melted into him. The heat of the sun, nothing compared to the warmth that passed between us. Our bodies pressed together in the quiet afternoon. Skin on skin, breath on breath, the world receded. The trees, the lake, the rules we had lived by. They all fell away. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. His heartbeat thudded against mine, and we stood like that for a long time, holding each other in silence, as though the embrace could undo years of aching restraint. His hand moved slowly up my back, and I felt it then. The rhythm, that unspoken pull, the shared breath, the quiet swaying that came not from music, but from the unmistakable beat of recognition. It wasn't a decision. It wasn't planned. It was a culmination. The hidden volcano of feeling that had grown slowly, secretly, patiently, finally erupted in the stillness between us. A surrender not just to each other, but to the truth we had both been too afraid to admit. And in that moment under the late summer sky, nothing else existed. Only this. We stayed like that, held in each other's arms until the warmth of the sun began to dim slightly. The breeze cooled our skin but did nothing to settle the storm that had passed between us, or the one still quietly brewing beneath the surface. Ethan pulled back slightly, his hands still resting on my waist. He looked at me, a faint smile touching his lips, eyes flicking downward for a moment before he said softly, "Do you have any water?" The question was so ordinary, so innocent it almost made me laugh. I nodded, still catching my breath. "In my bag," I replied, gesturing to where it sat beneath the shade of the pine tree. He moved to it, kneeling beside the basket, lifting the towel that partially covered the contents. And then I realized he was about to see it. Before I could reach him, before I could divert his attention or make some rushed excuse, his fingers brushed against the velvet pouch tucked beneath the folded napkins and fruit. He paused, lifted it slightly, and looked at me. The look in his eyes wasn't shock. It wasn't confusion. It was something else. Understanding. A quiet recognition that spoke volumes without a single word. I felt a surge of heat rise in my cheeks. But I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. Instead, I lifted my chin slightly, letting the silence between us hold what couldn't be explained, because I didn't need to. He stood slowly, the pouch now quietly resting back in the basket. He walked back to me, his voice low, steady. "If you came here to relax," he said, his hand gently brushing a strand of hair from my shoulder, "then lie down. Let me give you a massage." His fingers grazed the small of my back again, and I obeyed, without a word, lowering myself to the towel, heart thrumming against the earth. He knelt beside me, his hands warm, sure, smoothing oil into my shoulders, my back, the space between us vanishing with each touch. But before I could speak, before I could turn to meet his gaze, he leaned down slowly, deliberately, and he kissed me, not in a rush, not in confusion, but with intention. His lips against mine felt like everything I had resisted and everything I had needed. A gentle fall into something inevitable, something forbidden and sacred all at once. I closed my eyes and let it happen, not because I had lost control, but because I had finally stopped pretending. The trees around us seemed to hold their breath. The lake reflected the sky so perfectly it felt unreal, like the world had softened at its edges. For a brief moment, there were no labels pressing down on the silence. No expectations, no definitions, just two people standing in the same quiet space, caught in a feeling neither of us tried to name. And within that fragile stillness, time lingered, allowing us to remain exactly where we were.